People who've seen someone get fired on the first day, why were they fired? Worked in a chemical plant as QC, to make it short, I was one of the chemists, who check if the products were good enough, to leave the plant. A guy working in production, came for his first day, he took his break, and he lit a cigarette, next to a 10,000 liters acetone tank. He was out, before I could even blink an eye. Was in the local Walmart, needing to take a leak. Walked into the bathroom, to a manager and employee, staring down a stall covered in shit. The manager was explaining to the dude, that cleaning shit, is in the job description. The guy responded, well, I'm sorry that this is my first day, but F that, and walked out. Homeboy was allowed to play music on Bluetooth for the restaurant, on the first day, went to the bathroom, and started watching porn, and forgot he was still on the speakers. Hilarity and dismissal ensued. Okay, I'm just gonna say it, if someone watches porn in the bathroom at work, they have a problem. The afternoon of his first day as a developer, he was noticed, downloading the source code of our main product app, from the source control system, to a personal USB stick. Said, he wanted, to take it home, and mess with it, in his spare time. Edit, after some questions, some clarification. 1. This was after he'd signed the IT security policy, to say he wouldn't, and they made sure, people read it. 2. This was also in the mid-teens, in a company, that really didn't like working from home. Our nearest solution was RDP Gateway, into an on-prem physical desktop, and that was mostly, an extreme weather option. The chief exec hated the concept, of people not being in the office. 3. They were a small-scale developer, organic growth from a two-man company over about 10 years, that suddenly had to ramp up to a much larger set of developers, partly to update the tech stack, and was hiring fast and starting fast. It took a while, for infrastructure security to catch up. In fact, this was partly the incident, that kick-started the catch-up. 4. I don't work there anymore, average 20% below market rate pay, really bites. On my first day at Target, another new hire, jokingly jumped into the cardboard compactor, and the boss sent him packing instantly. It wasn't on or anything, they just have a zero-tolerance policy, when it comes to jackassery. We'd been on the job for less than an hour, so, he made something like $6 total, while working for Target. Send him packing, made me imagine him, being compacted into a cube, Tom and Jerry style, and shipped back home. I sent to do maintenance for Target. I had luck out and tagged out, the cardboard baler, due to a faulty hydraulic line. Came in the next day, and found my tool cage unlocked, and my lockout lock cut. Overnight manager used his keys on my cage, to get the bolt cutters, cause I was the only key holder for my lock. He was let go immediately. They did not mess around with safety, on that level. New substitute teacher, fired on day 1, for writing, "Be quiet," in Sharpie, on 2 kids' foreheads. This is wrong on many levels, but it is funny. New substitute teacher, fired on day 1, for writing, "Be quiet." I'm sure, I saw that written on a whiteboard, during my school days. In Sharpie. Seems like honest mistake. Firing someone for using a Sharpie, on a whiteboard, seems like overkill. On 2 kids' foreheads. Oh. I hired temp for data input. Her first day, a guy pulled me aside, and said, she can't be here. Apparently, one of our full-time employees, had a restraining order against her. I sent the employee home and apologized, then called her agency, and told them, she was not welcome back. Not sure what the order was for, but my guess is, stalking. She knew what she was doing. I worked as a staffing firm manager, for 18 years, she definitely knew where he worked, if he had a restraining order on her, and she didn't turn down the job. She could have always told us, I can't do that one, as my ex works there. Better than us, losing a customer, because she failed to tell us, and now client is like, ex agency sends out girls, with restraining orders, let's not use them again. I was working at a large-scale architectural firm, in the Bay Area, in 2004, and they hired a new guy, and after his orientation and paperwork, he finally gets to his cubicle. The first thing he does, is, puts on his headphones and blasts death metal, Cannibal Corpse, so loud, that everyone can hear, and that's him, using headphones. However, that was not got him fired. His first work item was, to write a company-wide email, that said, Debbie Harry of Blondie, was responsible for 9/11, and wrote about 30,000 words for it. I have never seen our HR manager run out of her office so fast. Dishwasher shit his pants, then kept washing dishes. Dedication like that is hard to find. A man of focus and commitment. We had a dishwasher show up for a shift, not his first day, though, and kept bending over in pain, grabbing his groin. Manager finally asked what was going on, and he pulled his apron back to show blood that soaked through his pants. Dishwasher was a total stoner, and he owed money to a dealer who sliced his sack open with a razor for not paying. The manager rushed him to the hospital to get his sack stitched up. Edited for context, Spicoli, the name we gave him, I don't even remember his real name, dabbled in everything. Was on parole for drugs, and dropped acid before our summer party. The night he quit, there were 2 police officers at the bar, paying for their dinner, and one of the cooks thought it'd be funny to point them out to him, and say they were asking about him. Spicoli ran out the back door, and never returned. The cook, Eddie, thought it was hilarious, until he ended up washing the dishes that night. I assume whoever sliced him held him down. Sack equals balls equals scrotum. First day, IT guy made his computer's desktop wallpaper a Facebook pic of a female co-worker he had just met. Reminds me of a story I heard. Dude was hired as a tester in the IT department. Apparently, he made an Excel file and ranked all the women in the company. There are a lot, from most to least effable. He didn't realize that the OneDrive was shared with the entire company, over 300 people, and clearly said who had created the document, LMAO. It's one thing to be creepy as F like that, like, okay, I guess there are just weird psychopaths everywhere, but to do something like that, using company resources? How effing stupid do you have to be? Like, how did he even get an IT job, if he didn't even understand the possibility that might get leaked everywhere? That's what baffles me the most. He was a first-day blackjack dealer. He took in $5 cash, and exchanged it for a $500 chip. The lady stared at him for a good 20 seconds, picked up her chip, and left the building. Gaming took his badge shortly after. Dishwasher. First day on the job, went on break, and went to the bar next door. Took a while to come back, so chef went and found him. We needed a dishwasher bad, and he was actually pretty damn quick at doing dishes. Chef gives him a second chance. Second day, goes on break again, and stops at 7-Eleven. Gets a tall boy of Mike's Hard, and starts drinking it right outside the back door. We have a picnic table right outside our back door for staff to eat and smoke. Chef finds him again and fires him on the spot. Sad part is, my chef probably wouldn't have gave a shit if he was always drunk. It was the fact he didn't even try to hide it. I worked in a kitchen, and a new guy came in. I asked him to grab something from our cleaning supplies storage, which was in a shed out back. He was gone for a while, so I took a look at the cameras, and he was smoking a blunt while peeing in the shed right next to the cleaning supplies. While peeing in the shed right next to the cleaning supplies. He was just topping off your ammonia. Yeah, honestly, I'm not surprised. My first kitchen job had a Seekin out back for storage, and the cooks used to get me to watch the door while the two of them crushed a 12-pack every morning in 10 minutes or less. They had my ass doing fireball shots and smoking doinks with them half an hour into my first shift as a dishie. Thank God, I don't have the Dagon bone in my body, but some places are just like that. 17-year-old me didn't mind. It wasn't even a bar, just some diner that was really popular with the trucker and church crowds. The blunt probably seemed like a no-brainer. I can't explain the pissing though. Probably just absolutely shit-faced. I honestly liked working in a joint like that, because no matter how hungover I showed up, I was still the golden child. It let me live my best 18-year-old life. It also kept things interesting. Highlights include: guy, always eating out of the dish bins, despite my constant offers to make him whatever he wanted. He just liked soggy bread, I guess. New hire, that was an obvious meth head, and a 5 feet 1 inch mouthpiece, got into it with me during the dinner rush, and decided to follow me when I took the garbage out one night. Old Turkish prep cook sees him follow me out, and follows too, just in time to see Buddy take a swing at me. Prep cook helps me throw him in the dumpster. 20 minutes later, a waitress comes in from a smoke, and says, he's sitting out back, crying. Opening short-handed at 5 a.m., and I'm helping my only help make a fort out of the bread racks, because he's too drunk to stand, and insists, he just needs a nap. Line cook, wearing a Rolex to work, showing off the receipt for $20,000. At the job he made $12 an hour at. He is in prison for 3D printing guns, and selling drugs now. I eventually moved on, and worked at actual decent restaurants, and it was such an adjustment. I kind of miss the chaos of working at a dive. Your guy would have fit right in there. Graphic designer. Didn't know how to use a mouse. Edit, since this comment got a ridiculous amount of traffic, let me explain it a bit. She was an older lady that had done graphic design back in the 70s and 80s, when it was mainly analog, and she was just getting back into the workforce after her kids had moved out, not realizing that 100% of the work was now digital. Nice person, everyone was sad that she had to be let go. I was a contractor for this company, not directly employed, and only heard of it firsthand from the director of the department. How does that even happen? How do you hire a graphic designer without verifying his skills first? She was an older lady with lots of graphic design experience from decades ago. Basic computer skills are kind of assumed nowadays. I was an IT contractor to this company, and not involved at all, just heard about it firsthand. Similar story. Late 90s, I hired a PhD whose dissertation was spot-on applicable to a government research organization where I supplied personnel. Sent him to the site, and they called me to tell me he couldn't turn on a computer and had no idea what MS Office and Word were. I called him, and he explained that the paper he had shown me, that he had authored, was his thoughts, but created by his grad students. They handled all the computer stuff. He was practically useless outside of an academic setting. Smart guy, but not smart enough in the skills we needed. Nurse, who failed his drug test on the first day. He did the test days prior. We got results on his first day. He replied, "Yay, I thought that might happen," when he was told he failed his UDS. Just turned around and walked out. It is my understanding that most nurses get hooked on drugs after starting the job. At the store I used to work at, 3 people started on the same day. One was walked out during his first break because the results came back and he had failed his drug test. The second guy was walked at lunchtime for the same reason. The third guy ended up working there for years. Guy at fast food place showed up drunk and 3 hours late. Then he didn't clock in, just started working. When the manager asked him to clock in, he yelled. She was a tiny lady, so she called in another manager to help fire him. I like how drunk and 3 hours late didn't do it, but working without clocking in did. My first day was also the first day for another dude who showed up an hour and a half late. After being there for about 15 minutes and sort of starting helping me do the very first task we were assigned, he gets pulled into an office and fired. On his way out, he is walking past where I'm still working, and he says, "They fired me for being late. I can't believe it. Do you think you can give me a ride?" I laughed out loud and sheepishly said, "Sorry dude. I'm kinda working right now." He thanked me anyways and walked out the building. He accidentally did me a big favor, because so many of my new coworkers saw that interaction and thought it was so incredibly hilarious, they all became immediately friendly with me to talk about it. I was bartending at a sports bar in Hell's Kitchen. New guy, training first day, supposedly several years of experience. He attempted to shake a Jack and Coke, and of course covered the bar in his mess. Didn't come back for day 2. Worked with a bartender who asked, "What's in a rum and Coke?" Someone just asked for it. That bar was known for hiring dudes cause they were pretty, not because they knew what they were doing. He didn't last the weekend, though. Pushed the emergency stop red button when there were signs everywhere saying, "Do not push unless emergency." Corporate needs to perform an investigation before work could resume. Dude didn't even want the job, just wanted the glory of pushing the button. Fighting with a customer by getting in their face and yelling at them. The dumbass thought the company owed him loyalty for being an employee. Oh boy, wait until he learns. Edit, for clarity, this guy was 100% at fault. He was damaging an item the customer bought. The customer politely asked him to be more careful, and that was all it took for the guy to snap. This man got to live the dream of every retail worker on his first day. Man speedran a retail career, LOL. Our town's prick mayor forced his spoiled prick son to get a job at a restaurant where I worked. On his first day of training as a host, the kid sat in the waiting area, looking at his phone, instead of standing behind the host stand, greeting customers. The trainer tried to sort him out a couple of times, but he'd just greet one customer, walk them to their table, then go right back to sitting. The manager came to talk to him. Then the kid sighs, says, "I can't do this," and heads for the exit. They told him, if he was going to walk off his shift, he shouldn't bother coming back, and the kid just waved on his way out. He only lasted a couple hours. At least, he didn't act super entitled and flip out, he just recognized that he literally wasn't raised to do work like this, and left, LMAO. Dude made an offensive black joke right next to a black lady, also on orientation. The HR lady was there, and immediately fired him, and had security walk him out. I had a dude make it a week. I ran a parks department, they hired a guy, I told them not to. He called a family of Hispanic people a racial slur, and I fired his ass. County HR called, and told me I couldn't fire him, that wasn't the process. I was just like, he stayed fired. I've worked at a daycare for the past 15 years. One girl that got hired got fired within 1 hour by calling the babies things and screaming out stuff like, "How do I shut this thing up?" or "God damn it, these things smell so bad." I kicked her out of the classroom. After 10 minutes of this, I much rather have been by myself, and she was found laying on the break room table, playing on her phone. I never saw the HR people get to my center so fast. Warehouse job, right out of high school. Guy started hitting on the young lady that was our supervisor, and when she let him know that wouldn't fly, he started in with a hardcore sexist, misogynistic BS about how she couldn't possibly be good enough to be a supervisor of men, among a lot of other crap. He was gone before lunch. LOL, I can top that. I once interviewed a man to be my assistant. During his interview with me, he started ranting that he should be given my job. He didn't get my job, and he also didn't get the assistant job. I ended up hiring another guy to be my assistant. He was professional and hardworking. I've stayed in touch with him, on and off over the years since, and have written him several recommendations, until recently, when he decided to start sending me thirsty texts. Just, why, dude? New hire called in on the first day of orientation, tells them she can't start work until next week. Quarantine, the day she was supposed to return to work with Dr. Note. Worked a couple of days. She called in again, and said, 2 weeks before she could come back to work. Hurt her back. She worked the first 2 days after her leave was up, and called in the next day, saying it would be another week before she could come back to work. At that point, they had reviewed some security footage for law enforcement, unrelated, and caught her stealing. Not from the company, but from another employee. She was fired. 2 days later, her husband shows up to surprise her at work with a homemade dinner. Boss has to deal with it. Apparently, she was telling him she was working a lot of hours for the last month and a half. I fired a man on the first day for incompetence. I work in IT. He claimed to have years of experience, but even after I showed him how to edit a text file in Notepad, he couldn't do it. I have a funny one, and it was working in technical support. I'm using technical support in a much different way, where, if a mechanic can't fix something, they can call technical support from the manufacturer, and potentially, a corporate mechanic will come help fix stuff at the actual location. I was a tech support mechanic for a relatively small marine electronics company, and was also the main sales rep in my area, and just was the go-to man for this brand in a region. I had said multiple times we needed another set of hands, and finally HR called and said they had someone, and he started that day. A guy showed up in khakis and a polo shirt. I was wearing trunks and flip-flops, with a dirty company t-shirt, as this was a marine business in South Florida, and they had sent me a straight-up IT tech support guy. HR didn't realize what they were hiring for, and the poor guy didn't realize what he was applying for. Honestly, it went as good as it could have. I told him I could use the labor, and if he was good with the pay, I wouldn't bring it up, while he looked for the job he actually wanted, and he tried his hardest for a couple months, until he had a new job, and at the end, he thanked me, and said, he had a really nice work vacation, because he likes working with his hands in his free time and it was a really fun experience. I taught him how to fish too, in our free time, hanging out at the docks. It could be a goofy buddy comedy, if it wasn't such a lame subject. Worked as a chef earlier in my life. Dishwasher guy, walked into the stockroom, and I literally watched him put a bottle of, like $2 cooking Merlot, under his apron, and walk out. I grabbed the exec chef, and we confronted him. He says, I wasn't stealing it, I was just going to drink it. Exec left to get security, hotel and casino, and he runs past me with a knife in his hand, grabs the bottle, uses the knife to shove the cork in, and pathetically drinks about 3/4 of it. When he was done, he stood up, all seeming proud. I held out hand and he put the knife in my hand, which I handed off to the other dishy. Then put my hand back out and he gave me the bottle. I lightly bopped him on the head with it, and said, hope this rancid shit was worth it, and then stepped aside, as security dragged him out of the pit. They asked, police or just toss him? I answered, he lost his job over a $2 bottle of wine, just let the guy go home. He got drunk at a company-sponsored happy hour, and tried to convince some of his new coworkers how cool it would be if they could, and proceeded to describe another employee at the event. It wouldn't have mattered who it was, but the icing on the cake was, she was the VP of marketing. My boss is the director of OPS, direct report to CEO out of 3 total. A few new hires see her first day or so, and do a, who's that piece of ass, type thing, and we laugh so effing hard. Buddy, she will cut your balls off, for breakfast. It's funny, cause like she's not a hard ass or anything, but her entire career has been in a 99% male-dominated field. You crack that joke, and she makes fun of your hairline, and sends you to Saudi Arabia for your first trip. I worked in audiovisual, for large corporate events, a long time ago. We had a helper from another location, help on a big conference. He criticized everything, from the moment he walked in. After his shift, our boss chewed him out. He cried on his way out the door. Then he forgot his car keys, and had to come back in. He wasn't fired. But he never came back, to our location, to help again. Fired an employee on their first day, when I asked them to turn on their camera for a call, and it wasn't the person I interviewed. I have so many questions. I work in tech. Web software development. Pretty everything went remote when COVID hit, and we really didn't have the best practices in place to screen out total frauds. Role in question, interviewed in Zoom, with 4 people at the company. Passed. Day 1. It wasn't that person, who virtually showed up. The most amusing part is, that our VP was from around the same part of the world, and when this developer joined their first meeting, camera off, he was immediately called out, for having a different accent, than the person who interviewed. The camera requirement, we do all meetings on camera, just made it very clear, that it wasn't the same person. Dude got a job, at a Fortune 250 company, as a direct report, to a direct report of the executive committee. Was likely, at least a $500,000 job. After his first day, he takes his team, about 30 people, out for drinks and apps. This is kind of a no-no, as it's going to be a significant company expense, and the company is trying to cut back. Still, this isn't anywhere near enough to get him fired, just an odd choice. He ends up getting blackout drunk, and SH2 female employees on his team, asking them to sit on his lap, putting his arm around them. His behavior was recorded and via phone. Next day, he has a meeting with HR, and was terminated. I got fired, at the end of my first day of work, at a small gift shop in a national park. Apparently, I was supposed to show up for my first day of work, knowing the entire product line, where it was located on the shelves, how much it cost, and where everything was in the storage room. The other employee, who was the golden girl, and had worked there for 3 years, refused to help me learn, and spent most of the day, sitting out back, getting high. The kicker was, the owner had spent the entire day upstairs, watching the security cameras, to see how I was doing, and knew that the other girl wasn't there doing her job. On the plus side, the owners of a nearby restaurant, had been in the shop, and we had chatted, while I was trying to find the item that they wanted. They hired me to work reception in their place, because they figure, that if I could still be pleasant and chatty, while having an awful day, then I would be perfect to greet their customers. It ended up being a good summer.